My son Marcus shouted at me like it was the last thing he'd ever say. He screamed, "Just die, I don't care." I didn't cry or ask him why. I just picked up my bag and left. No tears, no goodbye. He stood there in the hallway with this smug little grin on his face, like he'd finally won some big game. But the truth was, I wasn't walking out because I was crushed. I was leaving because I was finally done. That night, I didn't even pack clothes. I only grabbed my purse, my phone charger, and my keys. I left the groceries sitting on the counter and the laundry in the basket. None of it mattered anymore. When I stepped outside and shut the door behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. It all started 3 months before Marcus, who was 23, didn't have a job and hated taking responsibility for anything. Then he found some guy online who called himself a mentor. This man had fancy videos with shiny cars, piles of fake cash, and big talk about how the whole world was rigged against you. Only real hustlers would ever make it. He'd say, "Before we start, hit like and subscribe. Share your best life advice in the comments." He called parents energy leeches and told young people to cut off anyone who didn't cheer them on. Marcus ate it up like candy. He started repeating every line like it was the Bible. He'd say, "Chores are for minimum wage thinkers, and if they don't invest in you, they're dead weight." He stopped helping around the house. He slept all day and stayed up all night on Zoom calls with a bunch of other kids yelling, "Let's go," like they'd discovered the cure for cancer. I tried to talk sense into him. I showed him the guy's website. It was full of stock photos, countdown clocks that reset every hour, and reviews that looked completely fake. Marcus just laughed in my face. He said I was jealous and didn't want him to succeed. That hurt, not because he was mean, but because he honestly believed it. He looked right at me and said I'd been a loser my whole life, like working 2 jobs to raise him was something to be ashamed of. Then the money started disappearing. First, $3,000 from my account. Then $5,000, all in my name. My heart pounded as I stormed into his room. Before I could even open my mouth, he looked up and said, "Oh, you saw that?" Like it was no big deal, like I was the crazy one. He told me, "It's an investment. You'll get it back triple." I told him he had 24 hours to fix it. He got up, got right in my face, and said I was holding him back, that I was the one draining him. Then he yelled that awful line, "Just die, I don't care." I stared at him, and in that moment, I didn't see my son anymore. I saw someone so lost in a lie he couldn't tell what was real, so I smiled, because I knew it was over. He thought I was leaving because I was weak. He didn't realize I was finally strong enough to let him fall flat on his face. It all started like every scam does, not with a sales pitch, but with flattery. Marcus first found the guy on TikTok. He had slick hair, a shiny gold watch, and these deep-sounding quotes like, "Money isn't real, confidence is." Marcus, who'd never held a job longer than 3 months, was hooked right away. He watched every video, saved every post. When the man offered an exclusive mentorship, Marcus was ready to send money before he'd even read the fine print. He showed me the page like it was Holy Scripture, a countdown timer, reviews from fake usernames, and big promises about turning $500 into 6 figures with secrets the rich don't want you to know. I told him to be careful. I said, "Real businesses don't need fake timers and made-up urgency." But he didn't care about facts. He just wanted to feel special. This scammer knew exactly what to say. He told Marcus college was for sheep, parents were brainwashed, and if your family didn't support your hustle, they were energy vampires. Marcus clung to every word, because it let him blame me for everything wrong in his life. The first payment was $97 for a PDF. Then came $219 for a strategy call. I overheard some of that call. The scammer told him, "You're the kind of guy I'd partner with. You've got real alpha energy." You should have seen Marcus's face. He lit up like someone had just crowned him king. That one line did more than anything I ever could. It made him feel important. He started calling himself a digital entrepreneur and bragging that he was building a client funnel system. When I asked what that even meant, he rolled his eyes and said, "It's passive income. Mom, you wouldn't get it." But I did get it. I just didn't buy it. And he wasn't listening to anyone but that man on the screen. I started noticing changes in Marcus. He began waking up around 2 in the afternoon and staying up all night in his room. He'd blast loud motivational songs and pace around like he was high on something. He stopped doing his laundry and wouldn't eat any meals I cooked. Whenever I tried to talk to him about real things like bills or rent, he'd roll his eyes and say I was stuck in the past and would be dead before the economy collapsed, whatever that was supposed to mean. If I mentioned money, he'd start yelling about vibrations and a scarcity mindset. He even stopped paying his share of the rent. He told me I should be happy to invest in his growth. It felt like I was watching my own son disappear into some kind of cult, even if he was the only member. Then the mentor posted another video bragging that his private students were making thousands of dollars in just a month. Marcus believed every word because he needed to. He wasn't making a penny, but he couldn't admit it to himself, so he just doubled down. I later found out he'd opened 2 credit cards in his name to keep paying for these so-called upgrades, but that still wasn't enough for him. One night, while I was asleep, he used my old laptop to get into my saved bank account and wired $8,000 to some company I'd never even heard of. The next morning, when I confronted him, he didn't look sorry at all. He just smirked and said, "It's an investment. You'll thank me." I didn't scream or cry. I called the bank, reported the fraud, and froze my account. That's when he lost it. He yelled that I was sabotaging him, trying to steal his future. I told him the only thing I'd ever stolen was his dirty laundry off the floor. He didn't think that was funny. That night, he posted a video for his tiny online audience about toxic parents who ruin high-value men. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just confused, he was choosing to drown. He honestly believed this stranger on the internet cared about him. He truly thought this man who rented a fancy apartment and sold $2,000 courses to broke kids was going to make him rich. I saw Marcus recording voice memos to the mentor, pouring out all his hopes and dreams, begging for advice. I never once heard the man reply, but Marcus didn't care. Just being able to send those messages made him feel important. One morning, he ran into the kitchen with this wild look in his eyes and said, he wants to do a partnership. "I'm this close," I asked. "What kind of partnership?" He said, he didn't say yet, but I have to wire the money today to lock it in. I told him no. He exploded, yelling that I was jealous because I never took risks and that I wanted him to fail. I said I only wanted him to wake up. He spat back, "Fuck that, I'm out." When I told him he was burning his last bridge with me, he didn't even pause. He packed up my bags and told me to leave. Not his bags. That's when I knew for sure the mentor had already replaced me in his mind. What Marcus didn't realize was that this man he trusted so completely was about to disappear without a trace. After I left, Marcus actually celebrated. He posted a video on Instagram, standing in the same kitchen where I used to cook for him. He was holding a mug that said Boss Energy, smiling like he'd just won something. The caption read, "Cut out toxic people, even if they gave birth to you. Level up season." He didn't just block me on his phone. He deleted my contact and laughed about it to his little group of followers, bragging about how he'd finally cut ties with negativity. Meanwhile, I was crashing on a friend's couch, trying to fix the mess he left behind. I spent days on the phone with my bank, trying to stop the automatic payments he'd set up before I froze the account. The $8,000 was already gone. The bank said I had a case, but no guarantee, because the transfer came from a recognized device, my old laptop. It didn't matter that my own son had stolen it. It was still under my name. He'd taken everything he could before throwing me out like I was an old piece of furniture. From a distance, I watched him post his daily motivational videos, standing in the same spot, wearing the same clothes, and sitting in the same apartment, except now I wasn't there in the background folding his towels or bringing him coffee. He never once said thank you. And as soon as I was out, his girlfriend Talia moved right in when I left. She was only 21, easy to impress, and just as obsessed with that so-called mentor as Marcus was. From their videos, you could tell she believed they were going to be the next big power couple brand. They'd film TikToks where she'd sit on his lap and call him CEO, while he played with piles of cash that I knew were either borrowed or totally fake. The scammer had taught them to show abundance or die broke, and they were following those instructions like it was their religion. A cousin told me Marcus was bragging that he was about to get flown to Dubai to meet clients, and that he was in the top 5 earners in the program. None of it was true, but he needed to keep the story alive more than he needed air. The more I watched, the more I realized he wasn't just cutting me out, he was replacing me. He kept saying Talia believed in him and was ride or die. but I knew that kind of loyalty only lasted as long as the money did. Behind the scenes, his finances were falling apart. The mentor started sending him more payment requests, this time for advanced coaching and tax strategy sessions. Marcus kept paying, convinced the big payday was right around the corner. Meanwhile, my bank told me 3 new apps were connected to my frozen card fast cash loan apps with 30% interest rates. He wasn't just using my money. He was borrowing against it and digging himself into a hole so deep he wouldn't see daylight for years. Talia didn't know yet, but you could see the cracks forming. In one video, she commented, "Where's the money at? LOL," and he deleted it. In another, she didn't even repost his live stream like she used to. Instead, she posted selfies alone with captions like "Boss B***, TCH, moves, and no tags. That's when you know someone is starting to pull away. Marcus couldn't see it. He was too busy recording voiceovers about how the only currency that matters is belief. Even though the fridge behind him was completely empty. One day, during a live stream, the camera glitched for a second, and you could see a stack of unpaid bills taped to the wall. Red letters, eviction notices. He didn't even try to hide them, he was too far gone. A neighbor messaged me late one night. She said she'd heard yelling through the walls something about rent, lying, and where's the money? I didn't need to ask more. I knew what was happening. The mentor had promised Marcus some big partnership if he could show he had $10,000 in cash. That was the final hook. Marcus was desperate to keep up the act, not just for Talia but for the 800 people online who believed he was about to make it big. He thought he was in control. What he didn't realize was that when everything finally crashed, nobody would be there to catch him, not Talia, not his friends, not me, and definitely not that mentor, who'd been planning his escape since day one. The morning it all fell apart, Marcus was still completely caught up in the fantasy. He paced around the apartment in his bathrobe, repeating lines from the mentor's latest voice memo, like they were holy scripture. "This is your moment, kings. This is the deposit that changes your bloodline." He had just wired nearly $10,000 from those loan apps to some company called Next Phase Capital. The mentor told him he'd get a confirmation email by 9 a.m. sharp. He waited at the kitchen counter, refreshing his inbox every 15 seconds. He was sweating, muttering, telling Talia, "They're going to announce my promotion today." She didn't look impressed. She was scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. When he asked her to record him opening the email for content, she said, "Only if you actually get something this time." That should have been his first warning, but he ignored it. 9 o'clock came and went. Nothing. No email, no text, no call. 10 o'clock, still nothing. He started frantically checking all the apps, hoping for a sign. The Discord server where he used to chat with the top-tier mentees, gone, deleted. The Telegram group, empty. All the admins were removed. Every message wiped clean. He hit refresh again and again. Still nothing. Talia finally asked, "Did you pay through a website?" Marcus said, "No, it was a private wallet. It's more secure." She just stared at him, not even blinking, and asked, "Did you at least get a receipt?" He said, "They don't do receipts. It's crypto." She walked out of the room. He ran after her, babbling, "It's a timing thing. They're based in Dubai. The hours are different." She shot back, "Dubai's 4 hours ahead. Genius." He tried calling the mentor straight to voicemail. He tried again, still nothing. The number that once sent him pep talks was dead. He ran back to his laptop, searching for any trace of the man. All the old videos deleted, Instagram blocked, Twitter gone, YouTube wiped clean. It was like the guy had never existed. Talia came back in and asked him, flat out, "Are you saying this guy ghosted you after 10 grand? He looked right at Talia and said, "No, it's not like that. He's building something bigger. This is just a transition." But she stared at him like he was made of thin glass, ready to shatter any second. Then she said the one sentence that made it all real. "You got scammed, didn't you?" Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't, because saying yes meant admitting that everything he'd built, the big persona, the brand, the confidence, was just air. He sat down on the floor. He didn't cry or collapse. He just looked empty, like someone had unplugged him. He kept trying to think of some way out, some loophole that would prove this was all a mistake. But all the signs were right there. From the start, the mentor had dropped hints talking about shaking off weak hands, disappearing from the grid, and cutting dead weight to build the empire. Back then, it sounded cool and mysterious. Now it sounded like an excuse he'd planned all along. Marcus pulled up his banking app. The balance was negative. The loan interest was growing by the hour. No more savings. No credit left. No one to call except me. And I was still blocked. Talia asked, "What are you going to do now?" He said, "I'm going to fix it." She asked, "How?" He just whispered, "I'll figure it out." That's when she started packing. No yelling, no tears, just quiet. She picked up her skincare bag, her laptop, her charger, and one jacket. He looked up and asked, "Wait, you're leaving?" She said, "I'm not going to be the girl who stays with the guy who lost everything to someone named Next." He called her shallow. She told him she was tired of pretending to play house with a man who couldn't even pay for his own Uber ride. Then she walked out, just like that. He didn't try to stop her. Not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't move. For the first time in years, he didn't have a plan, a script, or a fake success story to hide behind. All that was left was the silence of a cheap apartment filled with unpaid bills, eviction notices, and the smell of something burning on the stove because he'd forgotten to turn it off. And that's when he finally understood what it felt like to be alone, not by accident, but because of the choices he'd made. The day he told me to die was the day he threw away the only person who would have stayed. Talia didn't slam the door. She didn't scream or throw anything. She just zipped her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and said, "Good luck, Marcus," like she was saying goodbye to a stranger she'd forget by next week. He sat there on the floor. The laptop was still open, the screen slowly going dark. For the first time in weeks, he couldn't pretend anymore. No more live streams, no more voice notes, no more building anything, just bills, silence, and the awful sound of his own thoughts. He told himself maybe she'd come back later, that she just needed space. But when he opened the fridge, her favorite snacks were gone. When he checked the closet, so was her extra toothbrush. She'd already known this was the end. She was just waiting for the moment to be so dead there was nothing left to argue about. That first night alone hit harder than he expected. He tried to sleep but couldn't. The little red light on the router blinked at him, a reminder the Wi-Fi bill was overdue. The room felt cold and smaller than ever. He kept glancing at the door, hoping maybe someone would knock. But he hadn't talked to a real friend in weeks. The only notifications on his phone were payment reminders. In the corner of the room was the worst part, a shoebox full of unopened mail, credit card bills, loan notices, bank statements. He hadn't even looked at them because he didn't want to know how bad it was. He started opening the envelopes one by one. One letter said the loan balance had jumped from $2,500 to $3,800 in just 2 weeks. Another warned he had 7 days before it went to collections. That's when the panic finally set in. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that eats away at your chest like acid. He tried calling the bank to see if they could reverse the transfers. They told him once the money was sent, it was gone. He asked if he could call it fraud. They asked if he'd agreed to send it. He couldn't even answer. He lied and said he didn't remember. But the bank said that wasn't good enough. He hung up, tried calling Talia, blocked, tried texting an old coworker left on read. Even tried emailing the mentor's support team, but the email bounced back. Everything was caving in. He didn't eat that day, didn't shower, just sat there, replaying the past few weeks in his mind. All the times he told everyone he was about to be rich. All the posts where he mocked broke mindsets. All the times he laughed at me for working a regular job. Now he couldn't even afford a bar of soap. The second day, reality got worse. He got a message from the building his rent was 3 weeks overdue. Then one from the power company. Final notice. He had never handled any of those things. I was always the one who handled those things. I used to remind him when the electric bill was due, and he'd roll his eyes like I was annoying him. But now, he was sitting there reading shut-off notices like they were written in a language he didn't understand. He tried to sell his old camera equipment, the stuff he'd used to film all his motivational videos. The guy at the pawn shop looked it over and offered him $40 for everything, said it was an old model and no one wanted it. Marcus didn't even argue. He took the money anyway, just so he could buy instant noodles and a little gas. After that, he stopped posting online. He knew the moment he went quiet, people would start to figure out something was wrong. But he just couldn't keep pretending anymore. The weight of acting like he was winning was heavier than the failure itself. By day 4, he hit rock bottom. He found my old emergency stash $200 I used to keep taped behind the pantry drawer. He pulled it out without even pausing, like it was always his to take. He didn't think about what it was meant for. He spent it on food, gas, and one last desperate subscription to some shady crypto channel that promised you could make all your money back if you just flipped coins the right way. He knew it was probably a scam, but part of him still clung to the hope that one lucky break would fix everything. That night, he finally cracked. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said it out loud for the first time. I used her. He didn't cry. He didn't say sorry. He just admitted it like it was a plain fact because it was. He had used me for money, for help, for a place to live, for someone to blame every time he messed up. Every time he got angry, I let it go. Every time he fell, I caught him. And when he screamed at me to die, it wasn't just anger, it was his way of giving himself permission to erase me completely. He thought cutting me off would make him feel strong. Instead, it left him sitting in that apartment with nothing but his own voice echoing off the walls and the bitter taste of failure nobody else was going to clean up. And now, even if I did pick up the phone and come back to help him, he knew one thing: I would never look at him the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't deserve to be looked at with love anymore. By the end of the week, the power was shut off. No warning, just a loud clunk outside and then silence. No hum of the fridge, no lights, no Wi-Fi. Cold air rushed in, and pretty soon the smell of rotting food came creeping out of the fridge. He sat in the dark for a few minutes, like maybe if he waited long enough it would all just turn back on, but nothing happened. He called the power company and begged for a little more time. They told him the account was flagged for non-pay and overdue notices. He said he could pay next week. They said next week wasn't good enough. After that call, he drove to a gas station to charge his phone. He sat in the car watching the battery icon fill up, like it was mocking him for getting so low. He hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. The noodles were gone, and the pantry was empty. He pulled into a McDonald's drive-thru and tried his card. Declined. Tried another. Declined again. That was the moment it really hit him. He didn't just have low funds, he had nothing. Every account was negative, every card maxed out, and there was nobody left to ask. So he started calling people he hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin who used to crash on our couch, a guy from high school who once offered him a job at a car wash, an old roommate he'd stiffed on rent. Nobody picked up. The few who did answered with the same tired line: "Damn bro, wish I could help." Nobody offered him a couch. Nobody offered him money. Not even a ride. They all remembered how he acted when he thought he was untavagant, smug, always bragging about how he'd cut off weak people. Now he was the weak one. When he got back to the apartment, an orange eviction notice was stuck to the door. Final warning: 3 days to leave or be removed. He tore it down and crumpled it, but the words were burned into his brain. That night he didn't even try to sleep inside. He parked his car 3 blocks away so nobody from the building would see him, and spent the night there, just staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, trying to remember the last time he felt safe. He used to think being alone meant he was finally free. No one to tell him what to do, no one to answer to. But now, sitting by himself in that car, being alone felt more like being buried alive. The next day, he went to the gym one he hadn't visited in months just so he could take a shower. He used a half-empty bottle of shampoo that someone else had left behind. He avoided looking in the mirror. It wasn't because he was embarrassed yet. That would come later. It was because he didn't recognize the man staring back at him. His eyes were sunken in. His lips were cracked. His skin looked almost gray. He looked like he'd aged 20 years overnight. After that, he tried to get a delivery job, anything to bring in some money. But when they ran a background check, it flagged him. The stolen cards he'd used had triggered a fraud alert. They said he could fix it, but it would take weeks. He didn't have weeks. He barely had hours. His hunger was so strong now, it felt like something alive inside him, gnawing at his ribs. He started grabbing sugar packets from gas stations, washing them down with water, telling himself this was just for now, that soon he'd be back on top, that this was just a rough patch before the comeback. But every time he picked up his phone to film another video, his hands started to shake. He couldn't do it anymore. The mask was gone. The act was over. People were starting to notice. His inbox was empty. His likes disappeared. Even the fake bot accounts that used to hype him up had stopped commenting. That night, he finally did something he swore he wouldn't. He searched for my name. After all the anger, all the blocking, all the pride, he still typed it in. First LinkedIn, then Facebook, and there I was. A new profile picture, smiling. I had a fresh haircut, nicer clothes, a new job working in HR. He scrolled through the pictures. There was one of me holding a cupcake that said welcome back. I looked calm, peaceful, like I was finally okay. That smile crushed him more than any argument we'd ever had, because it meant I hadn't just walked away from him, I'd moved on without him. He tried to write me a message, then deleted it. Tried again, deleted it. Nothing he thought to say felt right. Sorry felt too small. I need help felt too desperate. I miss you felt like a lie. So he threw the phone onto the passenger seat and pulled his hoodie over his face, trying to breathe through the panic that was bubbling up in his chest. That was the moment he finally understood what true loneliness meant. It wasn't just being alone. It was knowing that nobody was coming. Not Talia, not his so-called mentor, not any of the people he'd tried to impress, not even me. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do next. The next morning, the guilt hit him even harder than the hunger. He woke up with a stiff neck from sleeping in the car again. His phone buzzed, but it was only spam emails and a text from the loan app reminding him he owed another $100 in interest. He hadn't spoken to a real person in 4 days. The last time someone had even said his name out loud was when Talia was leaving him. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked at my profile again. For the 5th time that day, there I was laughing with people he didn't recognize. One photo showed me holding a coffee mug that said Survivor with a little gold star on it. Another showed me sitting at a table with a cake that said, "You're back, we missed you." That one hurt the most, because it meant somebody out there had actually noticed when I was gone. Somebody had missed me. Somebody still saw something good in me. Meanwhile, nobody had asked if he was okay. Nobody had even noticed he disappeared. All those videos he made, all the bragging, all the big talk about how he was going to be rich, they'd all vanished like they were never there. He kept scrolling. He found a quote I'd posted that read, "Sometimes the best thing they ever did was push you out." He stared at it for a long time, not sure if it was about him, too ashamed to ask. But deep down, he already knew. For the first time, he finally admitted it to himself. It wasn't just that I was gone. I was happier without him. I had peace, and he had nothing. One by one, all the lies he used to believe started falling apart. He used to think I needed him, that I depended on him, that he was the only thing keeping me going. Now he realized he'd been the weight I had to drop. The worst part wasn't that I moved on. It was that I hadn't even hesitated. I'd already been ready. I had a plan. I had people who respected me. He had none of that. Just followers, not friends. Views, not real value. And once the money disappeared, so did everyone else. That evening, he drove past my new office, just once, just to look. He parked across the street, pulled his hood up over his head, and hoped nobody would see the man he had become. I'd warned him about all of it. I didn't see him that day. I never came outside. He just sat there in his car, watching the windows light up as the office filled with people. He imagined me inside working, laughing, maybe even forgetting he ever existed. That thought hurt him in a way hunger never could. For the first time, he started to wonder what it must have felt like for me when I finally walked out that door. What it was like to leave someone who wouldn't fight for you. He thought back to all the times I brought him dinner without being asked, the times I paid his traffic tickets, the new shoes I bought him, even when it meant less grocery money. And he never once said thank you. All the late-night rides when he needed a pickup, all the quiet pep talks, the birthday cakes he barely looked up from his phone to notice. He'd taken everything like it was owed to him, and the moment I finally pushed back, he screamed at me to die. Now that moment replayed in his head over and over, not just because he felt guilty, but because he knew it was the exact second he destroyed his last lifeline. He didn't know how to fix it. He wasn't even sure it could be fixed. But there was one thing he did know. He wasn't better without me. I was better without him, and that truth settled into his chest, cold and heavy, like a stone that would never go away. He hadn't planned to show up at my door that day. He didn't even know why he drove there. It was just instinct, like muscle memory pulling him back to the last place that ever felt safe. But this time, he stood outside like a stranger, not sure if he even deserved to knock. He hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. He hadn't slept more than an hour here or there. Nobody had looked him in the eye in days. The world had gone quiet around him. And in that silence, all the things he'd tried to drown out with noise came. After he stood there staring at the door, remembering the last time he saw my face, how I looked at him after he screamed those words. But what haunted him now wasn't his own rage, it was my smile. That calm, quiet smile I gave him as I picked up my bag and walked away. Back then, he thought it was mockery. He couldn't understand it, but standing there now, he finally understood. That smile wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was closure. It was the look of someone who had already let go. He remembered how I never yelled, how I never slammed the door, how I never even looked back. I didn't have to, because I'd already been grieving the loss of him long before he screamed those words. That fight wasn't the explosion. It was the ashes, and now, with everything gone, he finally understood what it meant to be the villain in someone else's healing. He tried to knock once, but his hand froze in the air. What could he even say? Sorry wouldn't mean anything. Help felt hollow. He stood there, replaying everything I'd done before the end. How I paused when I saw that mentor's name pop up on his screen. How I quietly took screenshots of his payments while he bragged. How I stopped making his lunches and started making my own plan to leave. I had seen the crash coming. I'd prepared for it. And when he finally told me to die, I didn't break. I just walked out of the wreckage. That smile wasn't for him. It was for me. It was the first time in years one chose myself, and that was what hurt him the most. Not that I left, but that I was finally okay without him. He paced in front of the door for 20 minutes, rehearsing what he might say, but nothing sounded right. He knocked twice soft, almost embarrassed. No answer. He waited, knocked again. Still nothing. Then he leaned against the door, like maybe I could feel how sorry he was through the wood. But I didn't open it. I was home. He knew it. My car was parked out front. The porch light was on. He could see the shadows moving behind the curtains. I was there. But I didn't come to the door. And that was the final proof that it was over. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't owe him a single word. That silence was the consequence he never saw coming. For a moment, he thought about leaving. He thought about walking away and telling himself this was just another failure. He could survive. But he couldn't. Because this wasn't just any door, it was the last one, the last person, the last chance to prove he was something more than what he'd turned into. So he sat down on the step, his back against the wall, his head in his hands, and for the first time since everything fell apart, he didn't feel like a victim. He felt exactly what he was: lost, used up, and finally forced to face the cost of everything he threw away. Above him, behind the locked door, I watched quietly, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because some apologies are earned in silence. He stayed on that step until his legs went numb, until his back ached, and the streetlights clicked on one by one, stretching shadows across the yard like time itself was trying to pull him away. But he didn't move, because he didn't have anywhere else to go. Not physically, not emotionally, not even in his mind. The idea of turning around felt worse than the cold concrete under him. He knocked twice again, softer this time, like maybe the volume of his guilt would matter, but the door stayed shut. He knew I was there. He could hear the soft clink of dishes, the hum of the TV, the sounds of a life that no longer included him, that hurt worse than the silence. It meant I had built something after him, something steady, something safe, and he had no right to ask for any of it. Still, he whispered, "Please," as if the word could slip through the cracks and find whatever piece of me still remembered the better parts of him. He thought maybe I would hear the shake in his voice, the way it cracked like the boy he used to be, not the man he pretended to become. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the door and staying there like it was the only thing holding him up. He didn't cry, not because he wasn't broken, but because he was past tears. There was nothing left in him to wash away. A neighbor walked by and paused at the end of the driveway. "You okay, man?" he asked. He looked up, blinking like he'd forgotten other people existed outside his own disaster. He nodded once. The neighbor didn't believe him but didn't push, just kept walking, shaking his head. That moment stripped away the last of his pride. It wasn't just that he had failed. It was that everyone could see it now. He wasn't mysterious or misunderstood. He was the man who screamed at his mother to die and came crawling back weeks later with nothing but empty hands and a hollow apology he couldn't even say out loud. Around midnight, I opened the blinds just enough to look at him. He hadn't moved. I watched him, the way you watch someone you used to love but don't recognize anymore, carefully, distantly, not with hate, with caution. I saw the way his hoodie was pulled low, how his knees were drawn up, how his fingers kept twitching like he was still trying to type out some version of the truth that didn't make him look pathetic. I could have opened the door. I could have ended it all right there. But I didn't, because this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't something you hand over the second you see regret. It's something that has to be earned in the long spaces between begging and becoming. He needed to sit there. He needed to feel what it's like to be powerless in front of someone who once loved him without question. He needed to understand that not all wounds get cleaned up with a hug. Some healed through stillness, through waiting, through proof. So I sat on the couch and let him stay outside. I knew he'd knock again in the morning. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe that was the last moment we'd ever share the heavy silence between us. Either way, I wasn't opening that door tonight, and when I finally stood up and turned off the porch light, he looked up, just for a second, and I saw the tiny flicker of hope die in his eyes. That was the real punishment. Not rejection. Not anger. Just the truth. Not everything broken gets a reset. I opened the door. Not because I forgave him, but because he was still there, curled up on the steps like a forgotten package, eyes bloodshot, face hollow, smelling like regret and rain. And I knew this wasn't some performance anymore. This was collapse. He didn't say anything at first, just looked up at me like he wasn't sure if I was real or another part of his breakdown. I said, "Get up, not here." He stood slowly, every movement stiff, and followed me inside without a word. I didn't offer a hug. I didn't ask if he was okay. I poured him a glass of water, set it on the counter, and waited. He sat on the edge of the couch like he was scared to touch anything, like even breathing too loud might get him thrown back out. Finally, he said, "I messed up." I nodded. "I lost everything." I nodded again. Then he asked the one question I'd been waiting to hear. "Why did you open the door?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Because you finally knocked like a man." That hit him harder than any lecture ever could have. I didn't coddle him. I didn't tell him it would be okay. I laid it out plain, a mattress in the spare room, a list of job applications, and one strict rule: 30 days. No handouts, no laziness, no lies. He nodded and said, "I deserve that." I said, "You deserve worse. But this is what I've got left." He cried then, quietly, not out of pity, but from the weight of finally being seen and held accountable. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying a month ago. This wasn't the start of some sweet reunion. This was recovery, and it was going to be slow, brutal, and earned inch by inch. But for the first time in a long time, he listened. And that's when I knew he was ready. Not for forgiveness, not yet, but for the first real step back toward becoming someone worth forgiving.